What's up, everyone? Today we are going deeper into this whole structural balance thing, and we've got Phil, our resident physiotherapist, here to talk about a physio's take on structural balance and the importance of it, why you should be doing it, and what it's going to do for you. Stick around. Yo, what's up, everyone? In case we haven't met, my name is Rad Burmeister. I'm one of the co-founders of Unity Gym and one of the co-creators of the UMS, the Unified Movement System, where we turn driven people into superhumans. And the way we get such astonishing results with our members is that we've created a program that has a perfect balance between strength, flexibility, and fitness, and also teaches you a path towards really cool movement skills like calisthenics and gymnastic skills. If you want to know how we do it, grab one of the free blueprints, the flexibility blueprint, the strength blueprint, or the nutrition blueprint. There's a link for them all in the description of this show. And I'm joined today by Phil. How are you, man?
So well. Nice to be here on a Tuesday, getting back to the good old days. And
yeah.
It's just couldn't get rid of me.
Just like the good old days, isn't it? Very cool, huh?
No, I feel very lucky in Australia that, we're relatively, it's pretty easy going here with COVID at the moment. So, yeah, it's great to be back on a Tuesday and back to somewhat normality. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Yeah, so good, man. So today we are talking, we're talking about structural balance and the importance of it, because this, we're at this point where some of the world, I know that some countries aren't as lucky as we are, but definitely in Australia, we're starting to get back to a little bit of normality. At least gyms have reopened. So we're getting a lot of people this week that are saying, the gym's open again. What's the best kind of training I can do? We really want to get people thinking about the importance of structural balance, not just at the start of your journey, but once you've come out of a big change, like being in lockdown and, having to train at home. So yesterday, Yanni and I, had a deep dive into it and had a little chat about it. And we just wanted to get Phil on board today so that, we could hear a physio's take on it, because we didn't really realize what we were onto with our program, and because Phil's been training with us for about 7 years now, haven't you, on and off? It's just been depending on what sort of sport you've been playing and where you've been located with your...
Yeah, it's pretty out of action a few times when I was on placements out and all over the place, but
that's right. But even before he was working, he had a practice here and he was working out of Unity Gym. He was training with us, and the more that our program evolved, the more Phil was expressing his... how would you say? I guess your approval of it.
Stokedness.
Your stokedness of it. Yeah. So I remember one time, Phil, you said to me, I would really struggle to find a better way to write a program for general population. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things with programming is like the best program you can do is very much in line with your goals. But they should all be based around some fundamental movement patterns in the body and some like fundamental strengthening of, your key movements and your key like joints. So I think the way that, the UMS is built, it's just really ticks all the boxes you need in a week to get a good sort of baseline that you can then adapt if you have some specialized interest. But for those who just want to turn up to the gym and have something that's going to tick all the boxes without having to, like, one of the things I loved when I first started training here was not having to think about things. I'd just come in and be like, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm just going to do what you say, and I know that by the end of the week, like, all the kind of major boxes will be ticked. And by the major box, I mean that strength side of things, the flexibility, mobility side of things, and the cardio fitness as well. So,
but even if we don't talk just about the UMS program in specific, because we definitely don't want this show to be that kind of a thing. What do you feel, in your professional opinion, what do you think are the major boxes that need to be ticked for somebody for a foundational type program, like for the average person? The people that we're talking to here, people that aren't necessarily, trying to, be at the top of their field in an athletic pursuit, but, want to be able to play whatever their chosen sport is on the weekend and want to be able to age gracefully. What do you think are the major boxes that need to be ticked?
Yeah, well, we need to get some load through the whole body is like the big overarching thing. So sometimes when people think about building programs, they get really focused on like certain things that they enjoy, and so they'll either heavily focus on just doing pulling motions, for example, or you see the kind of classic bodybuilder like chest and buys sort of like approach to training, whereas when looking at the UMS program or the foundations program, it's based around those kind of simple ideas of pushing and pulling in a vertical and horizontal plane. And when in all the past episodes I just did the 101st podcast upload.
Wow,
so we've like it's been going for a while now, and one of the common themes and one of the common kind of principles that I often talk about is trying to load joints in a balanced and variety of ways. So when you put in horizontal push-pull, vertical push-pull, it's just a great way of building up the musculature around the shoulder to support it really well. So, and that's one of the key tenets of the foundations program, which then goes into the UMS progressions program. And squatting and deadlifting, just such key movements. Why they're particularly good is with squatting, it's really looking at that triple extension, which when is great athletically, like jumping, running, all of these things.
You mean ankle, knee, hip extension?
Yeah, ankle, knee, and hip extension. And like that's such a key thing in a sporting context. But having spent a bit of time in rehab hospitals and especially geriatric rehab hospitals, you see what happens when people don't have that is that they can't get out of a chair.
Yeah.
And so it's such a relevant pattern that should be strengthened throughout your whole life. And our training in the rehab hospitals was basically doing sit to stands, which was getting someone to sit up and stand out of a chair and sit back down in that chair, because that's basically a squat pattern. So it's just such a key fundamental thing that it has just huge benefits to athletic and postural sort of stuff in the in your younger years, but then in older life, that's the thing that determines whether or not you're independent. Yeah. That's determines whether or not you're going to...
And it's that use it or lose it, isn't it? I used to think, before I became a trainer and before I started studying this stuff and learning about things like sarcopenia, and if you don't know what that is, that's the loss of muscle mass that happens as we age if we don't work to maintain it. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time I did a workshop on this, after about the age of 35, for a man loses about 0.6% of their total muscle mass every year, and a woman loses about 0.9% of their muscle mass every year. So it's a little bit worse for women. And people used to think that is just something that happened as you age, that you just became frail. But what we now know is that it's a use it or lose it thing. So you can work to build muscle mass up to a certain point in your life, and it just becomes harder as you get older, but at least to maintain it. And if you do that, there are plenty of examples now, and I've seen some of these weapons on YouTube, there's these examples of these people in their 70s that have been doing weightlifting and consistently been doing it, and they're still lifting some serious amount of weight and really getting around like a very, very active person. So the squat, like you said, is, for the lower body, lower body training is really simple, isn't it? It's really basic. You just need to be taking those joints through those full ranges of motion with the squat and the deadlift and really stimulating muscle growth.
Yeah, and with the deadlift, such a the hip hinge, and being able to lift something off the ground is again such a key fundamental thing that we really need to be strong in, because when you go and help your daughter move house or something, those little things that if you haven't trained that sort of hip hinge, loading in front of your center of mass, if you haven't trained that before, then that leaves you open to potential injury. So, and what I do like as well is that if you were just to train sort of strict form deadlifts the whole time, then you'd be become very good in very sort of confined sort of ranges of motion. But with the addition of Jefferson curls and as the programs develop into snatch, grip, deficit deadlifts, where you might get a bit more lumbar flexion, you might be doing it in slightly different positions of contact for the weight, then you're building up that resiliency to and exposure to different sort of postures while lifting, which is one of the kind of key things for a healthy body, is having a wide variety of stimulus, so that when you go out into the real world, that there's less that's going to shock your body and cause injury. So
and there's this term that a lot of people use, which people call functional training, and it's a funny one because I've correct me if I'm wrong, anybody out there, but I've never actually found a proper definition of what functional training is. I think it's a loose term that people use. Would you agree, Phil? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the things where it's kind of like, I think, it's a nice way to describe training early on, but now it's just been used as a label that doesn't necessarily mean anything.
Yeah, that's right. But for me, what functional training is, like, we've been able to identify what we believe are what some people refer to as primal movement patterns, where if you go back to is caveman a sexual...
Cave people.
Cave people now is what we got to call it. So cave people time, where, anything that we had to do was most likely broken down into either the squat, lunge, bend, or deadlift pattern, horizontal push, horizontal pull, vertical push, vertical pull, or rotational pattern. We either would have had to squat down to pick something up, lunge down to pick it up, bend down to pick it up. We would have had to rotate to throw something or pull something or push something. And everything that we did would have been broken down into those movements. So, what I think of as functional training is a program that balances those movement patterns, that has them all in there. And if you go to a gym and use cable machines or really any kinds of machines, you quite often do not tick all those boxes. You don't hit those, for those on the podcast, I've got my fingers in the air here doing the parenthesis things. You don't use the functional movement patterns that are really important in a good structurally balanced program.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I guess cable machines can, like a classic sort of cable pull machine can be quite useful for obviously that pull pattern. Yeah, but those other machines where you're kind of more locked into a certain
I guess
plane of movement.
Calling it a cable machine is not the right way. Yeah, fixed plane machines. I mean, things like, there's, when I was at the big chain gyms before as a personal trainer, there's people that train their legs, and the only way they train their legs was by doing leg extension and hamstring curls. So those seated quad machines where you're going through knee extension.
Doesn't really resemble much unless
it doesn't. And from what I remember, like, the research shows that can actually weaken the structure of the knee, because the muscles become very strong and you become good at exerting force in knee extension, but never under load, under the way that the body would use that force. And so then when you go and
and often when you're if you're doing explosive knee extension, you really need your hamstrings to slow your to slow down your leg, and that's often where you tear hamstrings if you go out sprinting, and at that last stage of as you're reaching forward with your leg under hip flexion and knee extension, that's when you tear your hammies. So things like that where you become really powerful in knee extension, but you haven't kind of taught the hamstrings how to be eccentrically strong and slow down a fast moving limb, then that's what's
So let's get a physio's take. So I'm going to get Phil to talk you guys through the importance of training agonist and antagonist, and even what those terms mean, because a lot of people that are listening to this have probably never really heard that before. So can you talk us through what agonist and antagonist muscles are, and how they need to be considered in a training program?
So basically, the agonist muscle is the muscle that's doing that main sort of movement. So if we're looking at knee extension in the knee extension, as we were just talking about, then the antagonist muscle will be the opposing muscle, which is,
the hamstring in that case.
Exactly, the hamstring in this case. So
the agonist is the one that's doing the work. So for knee extension, it's the quadricep that's pulling the leg into extension.
Yeah.
So for those of you that don't understand what that means, that's when you go from having a bent knee to a straight knee, that's knee extension. And then the antagonist is the hamstring, which is the muscle that's doing nothing, opposing that muscle.
And with, I guess, in a case like a knee extension machine, that's kind of the case, but in real life, usually the antagonist is doing something. And that's where that sort of dynamic stability that I always talk about with active structures being so important is that, our muscles are in a real world environment are always working together to control joints. So you need to have, the brakes of your hamstrings to, stop kind of over any sort of excessive movement. So, and this is something you don't think about. It's not something that you can be go hamstrings. But
it's something that when you don't understand this stuff, you put no consideration to it in programming. Like, we've seen it so many times before. It's like you said, it's this classic. This is what Yanni did before he became a personal trainer. He'll outwardly say this. Yeah. He spent years where when he went to the gym, all he did was chest and biceps because it's all he understood how to do. No one ever coached him on how to do it, and so he developed this horrible posture. And that's a really classic thing that a lot of people might be able to relate to is that the people, when they're doing a lot of bicep curls but no tricep extensions, which is as an example, anyone, of training the agonist but never training the antagonist. So talk us through what's going to happen in a joint if that's what you do long term.
Yeah, well, I guess if one muscle's really strong pulling you the other way, and then you don't have the the tug of war of the other side of things, if you're overdeveloping one side, then that joint is going to be really heavily loading that particular direction, and that can start to become pretty problematic. Not only with like the kind of general postural side of things, but it can just I'm a bit wary to say that there's kind of the symmetry in posture is a really interesting thing in physio, where it was kind of used to be seen as such an important thing to make people look exactly right and be 100% balanced. But the body is super resilient, and you will even if things aren't 100% symmetrical, you can still be a perfectly functional person without pain. But there's definitely, if you're going to be training the body in an unbalanced sort of way, then you're more you're going to run into some issues, especially if you start to try and get out of the movement patterns that you if you only go into the gym and train biceps or and then you have to use your extensor muscles, so your triceps. You're pushing yourself out of, I don't know, you're trying to climb up something and you push up, you're going to be weak through there, then you're going to run into some issues.
And it's something that for me I didn't understand for years. For decades of training, I was doing kung fu and martial arts, and I had no idea what it was. And the big thing that I developed a real imbalance with my hamstrings. My hamstrings became very weak compared to my quadriceps because I did, the exercises you do in kung fu. There's a lot of hamstring strength that's involved in it, and a lot of quadricep strength. The hamstrings are only,
thinking back to when I did the that horse stance video, I was like, oh,
yeah, the quadriceps just get burnt, and so then when I came into the gym and I started, training in a more balanced way, man, my hamstrings were weak, and they're still a weak point for me. That's still something that years later I'm working on. But if you don't at least start to go, okay, hang on a minute, let's think about how I'm training my body, and is this even a consideration in my programming? Am I considering how each muscle in each joint is getting trained? And if you're not, then you are going to run into problems.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I want to because what I want to talk about next is even just the concept of training every joint in your body, which is something that I'd like to move on. But before we move on from this topic, let's
Lee's just got a question.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Let's see what Lee's asked.
He says, have agonist and / antagonist issues in my top of left leg. Could Phil explain the components here, please? So I guess, are you asking what muscles are there? So and I'm interested to hear what the issue is. But yeah, generally if you're looking at the muscles around the top of your leg, you got your hip flexors there. But keep in mind, with your quads, one of your quadriceps, so there's 4 muscles there. Your rectus femoris is a quadricep and a hip flexor. So that's just something that sometimes people don't.
Hip flexor.
Yeah, exactly. Because we have a lot of 2-joint muscles, which is what is so important to when we're doing these sort of compound movements. We're using our 2-joint muscles in, I guess, more sort of functional ways here, where they're having to control both, the knee and the hip in this example. Whereas if you only did knee extensions for your lower body, then you're only, going to be training that muscle in the in the knee component of the of strengthening. So here you're saying TFL / glutes. So yeah, with hip flexion versus hip extension, just here with the TFL, it's not a particularly powerful muscle in hip flexion. Its main role is actually to control the ITB sort of tracking. It's got a but that's kind of another rabbit hole that we maybe don't need to go down. And so yeah, Lee Clements is chucking out some muscle names here. If that's probably not the most. Piriformis, my favorite. With.
Can I jump in here,
please?
Lee, you're making a really classical mistake that I was making until very recently. Phil kind of just made a joke at some of the things that Yanni and I were even coming out with, and the piriformis is the one that's made me think about this, because for for decades, personal trainers have been obsessed with the piriformis.
True.
I don't know why, but we
Physio
just
is true.
yeah,
Physio is
we just get taught about it. But for the first time, maybe not the first time, but for the first time in a long time, Phil got me to look at the gluteal muscles and the way that the piriformis is connected, like the way it sits on the pelvis and the femur, and it's one of 5 muscles, isn't it?
It's one of 6 external rotators.
One of 6 external rotators that when you look at them all together, it's kind of like saying, look, for those of you on the podcast, I'm holding up my hand and using my fingers as being joined together and saying, it's like saying that all these muscles that are connected, but this is the one that's the problem, when they all kind of pull in the one direction. So it's a funny thing, Lee. I don't know that trying to say it's this muscle or it's this muscle or it's this muscle is necessarily the answer. What I like to do personally is identify where weaknesses are in antagonist or left to right side, but then train movement patterns. So train agonist and antagonist movement patterns, which is going to hit all of those muscles that work with that, rather than thinking, I need to focus on strengthening my TFL, which is...
Totally. And I absolutely love anatomy. I got totally obsessed with it and, studied at uni a lot. And I would recommend, Lee, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, like go in there and learn some about hip, like especially pelvic and hip anatomy. Like it is fascinating. There's so much to learn there. But yeah, I don't think it's, too useful just at the moment about just going through all the different muscles involved there. But yeah, rather thinking about these key sort of movement patterns in the way that we, train them, especially in, the foundations program. And I just wanted to touch on one of the things that I think it's so useful to do the foundations program is the way in which it sort of sits with the UMS. It's just the progressions program is it's such a perfect place to come back to as well if, you're struggling with particular movements or you have particular injuries. Often, what I'm doing is just, changing certain people who are in the progressions. I'm just taking them back to some of the, the movements that are in the foundations, like 1 through 3 phases, and then inserting that in as, as the physio or the rehab exercise. Because often it's just kind of coming back to these really foundational, kind of more simple components of the progressions program and just really, nailing those movements and getting the, that balance right there. So I think, even if you're doing the progressions program, it's always useful to go back and, explore these simple movements.
Yeah. See, Lee, the thing is, I'm like, as Phil was saying all that and listening to what he's got to say and thinking about the way that Yanni and I created the Foundations program to tackle the majority of people's issues is that, when it comes to the hips, the hip is a simpler joint to train than the shoulder. The shoulder requires more complexity to create a healthier shoulder. The hip, it's simpler. It's a simpler way to train it. And the way that we tackle it in the Foundations program is that we basically work on training hip extension and hip flexion under load, but by giving it a different load stimulus. So by doing things like, for an example, doing unilateral work like split squats, step-ups, split squat variations, step-up variations, and hip extension variations like single leg deadlifts, plus bilateral work like deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, hip extensions, squats, things like that. You end up tackling most of the issues that you're talking about there, and over time, like usually a 12 to 18 week period, the majority of imbalance issues get evened out, or they come to such a small imbalance that it's not going to really cause you that many problems. What do you think about that, Phil?
Yeah, I think exactly right. Like it's, I think people get really sort of hung up on the super specific muscles a lot of the time, and if you train the system, as I often talk about, like if you give it a balanced stimulus, train that flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, and train it in the kind of demands that it will need outside of the gym. So with I really like how you go from the strength and mobility thing into the cardio part of the UMS program, where you then have skipping, jumping, step ups, box jumps, where you're exposing it to impact, you're exposing it to like that balance side of things with landing, and so I think it's all about just giving your joints a real general exposure to a lot of stimulus, so that then you're more resilient to whatever you come across in real life.
Exactly. Absolutely. I just want to answer Aiden's question quickly. It is off topic, Aiden, but I do want to help you out. You're saying, hey guys, just finalized my new program for the straight arm scapular strength. Are pseudo planche leans and feet assisted arch into hangs done for reps or hold times? Feet assisted arch into hangs, when you get started with them, do them for reps and try and hold for 3 seconds each. And you're going to be only aiming for about 3 to 5 reps to start with, man. And then you're going to work up to that 5 to 8 rep range. Pseudo planche leans are done for hold times, and you're going to be using the isometric strength formula to calculate your hold times and your sets. You also want to do a deficit snatch grip deadlifts. Is the deficit absolutely necessary? I just don't have something firm at that height to stand on. Brother, if you've got a barbell, unless you're using all of your weight plates when you train, then you've got something firm to stand on, because weight plates are the preferred option. When we do it, like just a 25 kilo weight plate, like just that much of a deficit is enough to get a really good height. So just one of your thicker
Start
weight
small
plates.
and then build up.
That's right.
It's one of the variables.
Yep. And is a deficit necessary? No, it absolutely isn't necessary. It's just a great way to create a deeper range, to bring your spine into more flexion so that you strengthen your body through, you basically become stronger in the hardest part of the lift, getting it off the ground. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think this is from Aiden's just finished 18 weeks of this foundations program. So it's a good kind of example of he's not going straight to the deficit snatch grip deadlifts. He's now like work through the whole foundations and now giving that sort of new stimulus. You want to really start out like this deficit position plus snatch grip is going to be quite different to what you've done before. Yeah. So with every other thing, it's all about gradual exposure.
Yeah, so even if you just start with like this much of a deficit, man, like 1 inch, that's going to be more than enough to do that for you. And I don't have those weight plate rads. I'm rocking the toaster weights. As you refer to them. Yeah, nice. I like it. All good, bro. Just, we got to make do with what we can do,
Yeah, just
right?
get like some, planks of plywood, like a couple of those, just something simple. For
the toaster weights, those were the dumbbells, right, Aiden? Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
If that's the case, you're definitely not going to be doing a snatch grip deadlift. True. You can only do a snatch grip deadlift with a barbell. There is no substitute for that. So if you don't have access to a barbell, you're not doing a snatch grip deadlift. You're going to just be doing a dumbbell deadlift, which is great. It's what you've got. So let me know when you get access to a barbell, because that's going to be different. So listen, the last thing I want to do before we finish today's show, because we're going to be talking about this all week. We're going to be talking about structural balance, the importance of it, and answering your questions on it. So if you've got any questions, get them in, and we're going to be continuing with this topic all week, because it is so important to understand. And I did want to talk about the importance of training every joint in the body, but today we spoke mostly about agonist and antagonist. So maybe tomorrow we can tackle that. We can talk about training every joint in the body. But what I want to do, I want to read out a post from Alex Seabrook, who's one of our legends in the UMS online coaching program, who has given a little shout out here for the UMS Foundations program, which he only finished several months ago. And this is what Alex has to say. He said, "Hey guys, I know a lot of people are probably wondering what program to do now that the gyms have reopened. Having been with Unity Gym for nearly a year now, I would highly recommend the UMS Foundation program, especially if you're coming out of lockdown. This was the first program I completed with Unity, and even as someone who had been a constant gym goer for over a decade, I found it both challenging and rewarding. After doing 10 years of standard gym training, I had developed tightness and weakness in areas that I did not know about until completing this program. The exercises are challenging for any level of fitness and a great way to set your body up for long-term success." And Alex has, since completing the Foundations program, he's not only hit his first muscle up by doing the Muscle Up Masterclass, but he's now doing sets of 4 or 5 muscle ups. And I guarantee you that the Foundations program is what set him up for that. It's really cool to see.
Yeah, if you look at the Foundations program, you've got grip strength stuff in there. You've got all the things that you need to basically expose your body to, like to do that ramp that I keep talking about, taking the stairs up to that goal rather than just running straight at a wall and then, expecting to suddenly be at the top. Yep. Like you really, this is a perfect sort of ramp to get you up there and, give your body that gradual exposure so you don't get shot down with tendinopathies and all sorts of nasty
Yep. Yeah,
things
absolutely.
that happen with, especially at this time of people getting back into gyms for the first time, getting exposed to weights again for the first time. Like, you really just gotta respect that it's been 12 weeks or something since a lot of people have been exposed to external weights. So yeah, really like perfect just to ramp things up again.
Yep, absolutely. Aiden is saying, yeah, I got a barbell attachment with those toaster weights though, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw it out there and say you're probably already going to be lifting with a deficit, because unless those dumbbell toaster things that you've got sit at the same height as what an Olympic bumper plate does off the ground, I'm guessing it's probably going to be a bit lower. That makes it a deficit. So that's going to be hard for you to be able to tell. I don't even know what the measurement is that a barbell sits off the ground. But yeah, don't worry about it too much for now, bro. Just go through the snatch grip deadlift. Do it however you can, and once you get access to a gym again and you can start doing a deficit, then we can add that in. Because again, the funny, when it comes to calisthenics and things like that, there's always another progression to do. But when it comes to weightlifting, you get to a point where there's not really that many more progressions to do, and once you get with a deadlift and you start doing barbell deadlifting, there's really conventional barbell deadlifts, deficit deadlifts, and remaining in deadlifts, and then using deficits with those, and they're the three real big deadlifts that people use. And most people, like the strongest people, they really use conventional deadlifts and snatch grip deadlifts as their main lifts.
Or sumo.
That's right, sumo.
But sumo. You don't like there's.
We're not getting to a point where you're like, okay.
Yeah, you don't always have to go to movement complexity as your next progression.
Don't. You can really just work on the snatch grip deadlift, and then when you've got the opportunity, you can go to a deficit.
But when you're at home with like limited weights, it's a great way of, if you can alter the by making it a deficit, then that will make the amount of weight you have relatively harder. So, it's a good way of going when you're with the home gym sort of limitations.
I guess my point was, if you can't do a deficit now, it doesn't matter. Because you know what? I learned how to do snatch grip deadlifts a decade ago, and guess what? I still do them all the time. It's not like that's a move that you'll do for 6 weeks and then you're never going to do it again. You are going to be revisiting this move for the rest of your training career.
And you can, just change up the parameters around loading, so you can do slow eccentrics, and there's different ways in which you can really make what you got quite challenging. So
once you get out of the foundations program, the deadlift variations, squat variations, as in high bar and low bar and front squat, bench press, bent over row, pull up, shoulder press, you are going to be doing those a lot. It's not like you do them once for one phase and then you move on and you never go back to them. They are the nuts and guts of a good strength training program. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Before we finish up, we've got to do the reveal. What's in the box?
Do we?
One of the comments.
Oh, right.
Just realised
this is
our
Theragun. So this is our new toy. It's our massage tool.
Just as well I moved on from massage and became a physio, otherwise robots would have taken over my job.
Yeah, that's it. That's our new toy. And if anybody wants to know, is it good? It is absolutely amazing and well worth it if it is within your budget, because it ain't cheap. It's not a cheap toy to get.
And apologies, we will clean up the desk next time. That just happened to me.
Yeah, but
still sitting there.
If it is within your budget, go and check it out. We'll make sure the desk is clean next time. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be talking more structural balance. If you've got any questions, get them in and we will answer them for you. Have a great day, everyone.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that far.
It's the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.